Hello, good evening, and welcome to Snow Chat Podcast, the first of ESF UK's podcast series. My name is Mark Neville. I'm the business manager of ESF in the UK. ESF being the École de Ski Français, which is the biggest ski school in the world and French's premier ski school. With over 17,000 instructors, 252 resorts across the French mountains. And we are here today in London, courtesy of OSR Studios. So thanks to the team at OSR here to film this. And we're going to be talking on our first podcast to my two guests, which I'll introduce you to in a minute, about ESF in general, about what it means to be part of the ESF family, how you can get involved with ESF and learn to ski or snowboard with ESF, everything about the ethos of ESF in France, and why ESF have produced or opened up about 9 years ago a UK office. So hopefully to all the listeners, this is our first one, so bear with us and hopefully you'll have some fun along the way. But I would like to introduce you to my first guests of this podcast. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Sébastien Mette. He is a 20-year instructor in France in a beautiful resort in the Tarentaise called La Rosière, which some of you may know if you're keen skiers. So good evening, Seb.
Good evening, Mark, and thanks for having me.
Pleasure. And I thought to myself, on the first podcast, what do we normally do? We normally invite guests like Seb and other industry experts. And I thought, no, there's a reason why ESF in the UK has been put together many years ago. So I've actually invited Ian Neville, my brother, Nev. So hello, Nev.
Good evening.
Nev was a business owner in La Rosière where Seb lived and where they both met. And I think it's fitting to have our first podcast, guys, and talk to you two because I wouldn't be here without going to La Rosière and obviously following my brother on holiday. And of course, I wouldn't be here without meeting you. And later on, we're going to talk about a key part of ESF in the UK, which was a person that we obviously sadly miss now, but and passed away several years ago, but an inspiration to us all in Simon Atkinson. So we'll talk about Simon as we go along. But for the purpose of this podcast, we can all relax now because so you can laugh and joke now because people are still listening, I hope. So Seb, I want to start with you. Talk us through what it means to live in the mountains and how, when you were a young lad growing up, what's your story on how you became part of ESF?
Well, it's quite simple. I was born in La Rosière, like you said. Went to a local ski club from a young age, did some ski racing. Absolutely loved skiing and embraced being on the mountain every day. So carried on later on doing racing internationally, which was great. Had a lot of fun. And then, sadly, about when I was 17 years old, I wasn't quite good enough to join the French ski team, so I decided to call it a day and retire from racing. And to me, the natural path after racing was becoming a ski instructor because I just wanted to give and share my passion for skiing with people, and teaching skiing was the best way to do it. So
was your parents skiing instructors or?
No, my mum is from La Rosière. She grew up there. She keen skier, but nothing to do with teaching or anything. And my dad is not from the mountain, so he's not actually a keen skier. So yeah, no, nothing to do.
So really, quite since you obviously were in the racing fraternity. So was there a club ESF then, or was there a racing part of ESF then that you joined, or?
When I started, I went to a ESF ski school to learn how to ski. We used to go with a primary school, and then I carried on during the school holidays going to the competition class. And then when I was 8 years old, I think I joined the local ski club, which is not directly linked to the ESF, but all the coaches from the ski club are ski instructors from the ESF, so they're kind of linked.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about what age did you start the process of becoming an instructor?
17. I started. The process is quite long, but quite early on, you can become a trainee and actually start working in the ski school, and then carry on doing all your courses until you're fully qualified. But I was 17 when I attended my first course, and to start working, you need to be 18. So about 2 weeks after my 18th birthday, I started working at ESF.
And just quickly, tell us the process because the teaching process to become an instructor is 6 years?
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah.
It varies, but if you're very quick, you can do it in 3 to 4 years. But I say average 6 years.
And it's the most toughest in the world, isn't it?
I guess so. That's what I've been told. I don't know. I haven't tried any others, but
Tough
yeah,
man, tough man.
it wasn't easy. Yeah, but
For the purpose of the people listening to this podcast, obviously we want to explain a little bit more about ESF in general and about the ski school. When you were at school, you were in school in the mountains, was that right?
yes.
Yeah. Did everybody, part of your curriculum was to ski every day, was it? Or was it?
Pretty much,
In the
not
winter?
every day, but in the winter with primary school, we would go about 2 afternoons a week, and then Wednesday we didn't have school, so 3 afternoons a week, and then Saturday, Sunday. So
And did every child or every young person in school, did they dream about being the next French downhill racer, or was there other things in the mountains that people wanted to do?
there's other things. I say the majority were, but yeah, it all depends what you grew up with and what your parents used to do, because some families in the mountain were not into skiing, and the children the same. So
What
but
year?
I'd say the big majority, yes.
So what year did you start your process as an instructor? What year? 2000?
2001, yeah.
2000. And this is when you, Nev, came into it, didn't you?
I first went to La Rose in 1996.
Wow, a long time ago.
Yeah.
As you can see, people, we're not that old, honestly. He might be. So talking to Nev now, your link. Tell me how you met Seb, because obviously this is why we're here, and we'll get to the crux of the matter with
So,
ESF in La Rosière.
I first went on holiday to La Rosière in 96, and I've been back every year since.
Right.
I think I probably first met Seb in the Rock Noir bar, which was the English hotel bar that was the centre of the village in the evenings. And dare I say it, Seb was still a teenager when I met him, playing in a local band. And that was the beauty of La Rosière. Everybody was one big happy family there, and we all got to know each other, and friendships lasted and friendships grew. So, and that's where it was.
And you worked for a company called Ski Olympic?
I went out there as the ultimate ski bum for a few years. In 2001, spent my redundancy check for a couple of years living the life of Riley up there. I did a season for Ski Olympic, then came back to London for a few years, and then ended up buying a bar. So I've kind of been in La Rosière from everything from the punter, the holiday maker, the ski bum, the business owner.
And I want to ask you the key question, because when you opened the bar, which obviously I was part to help you with, you said one key thing to me was you didn't want this to be a Seasonaires bar 24/7. You wanted to embrace the French culture. You wanted to embrace the French people, to bring them in. Tell us a little bit about your philosophy of the bar fusion era.
Well, I think without going on to the Simon Atkinson topic too early, he was instrumental in us getting the bar in La Rosière. But I think it's, Seb mentioned about why you would or wouldn't become a ski instructor. And I think the misconception of ESF ski instructors is they all strut around, touch me, I'm a ski instructor. But actually, the fundamental thing about being a ski instructor is they want to give back to the people. And that was the same philosophy that we had with the bar. I was a foreigner in France. It wasn't my village, and I was running a bar for the local people. And I think the ethos of our bar matched the ethos of ESF, in that you have to put back into the village and give something back in order to take things back out.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Very good point.
100%.
I think as well is that if you can, for the listeners that are listening to this, some people would be experienced skiers. They'll know La Rosière as a resort. Obviously, there's lots of other resorts around the French mountains. And on a British perspective, there are the top 50, 60 big resorts that the majority of the Brits ski in. So we've got 252 resorts in ESF, and still to this day, the fact that the most popular one is Val d'Isère on our stats, and yet it's the furthest resort to get to from any airport in France, and it's just bizarre how that is the most popular. But when we go back to smaller resorts in the day when you were growing up, how much of it has changed now? What I mean, you were 20 years as an instructor with ESF. Go back to the early days for me. What did it mean for you, Seb, to be an ESF instructor?
When I was skiing, I was getting so much joy and so much fun skiing. I wanted to be able to give it to other people and be for them to be able to feel exactly the same feeling I was getting on skis. So that was a key thing for me. Be able to give to people or make them feel what I was feeling, and
So to
think
give
that
back,
joy.
basically.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
I want to talk about how ESF in the UK came about, because it's quite important. That's why we're here on the first one. Now, I've met many people that are listening to this, many industry people, many tour operators, and over the 9-10 years I've been associated with ESF. And there's some fascinating people out there, some lovely people out there. But we always had this ESF, the French come across to the UK. ESF is very French for French in the day. I can 100% dispel that myth. It's not. It's one big family. Tell me a little bit about your experiences with the British market in the old days. So when you were younger, before you met Nev here and obviously friends in the village, how did the Brits come across to you?
They were like foreign customers, but they were very good customers. I think the Brits have always been quite keen skiers. Or the people who could afford to come skiing, they were very keen skiers, and they used to come and ski a lot. And so in the early 2000s, I think the British, there was huge numbers of British skiers in the Alps. And we had one in the ski school named Simon Atkinson, so it was very easy to understand the British market, because he was British, so he knew what wanted.
I think for the listeners, again, we've mentioned the name Simon Atkinson a few times now. So obviously you two were a lot more closer than I was at the time. So Simon was the only British director in the ESF organisation. I met him through you, Nev, and obviously I met Seb through you. An inspirational man, to say the least. And for the listeners listening, if it wasn't for Simon, who asked me many years ago can we do some social media or a website for ESF for the British market, then we wouldn't be sitting here. So I'll go back to Seb first. What sort of character was Simon as a director, the British director? How was it working with a Brit in a directional capacity with ESF?
It was great. First, when I started, he wasn't a director yet. He was a deputy director to another director. But he did his exactly the same qualification as I did, the French one, and become a ski instructor, and then very quickly became a deputy director. And he's the one who introduced me to teaching, really. When I first joined the ski school, I think one day I went out and followed one of his lessons, and he was teaching English, actually, English low intermediate people. And I followed him for about 2 hours, and at the end I was like, what have I walked into? Is it really what teaching is about? Because I had no idea, really. I was a complete novice in teaching, and I was like, yeah, I've got a lot of work to do to become like him, and it's going to take a lot of hard work and effort to become like him. But he was an inspiration all the way through the process to become as good as he was.
And Nev, your memories of Simon?
I've got dozens of memories of Simon. From the first time I met him in the Rock Noir bar to being allowed to take part in the ESF Torchlight Descent on a Monday evening, which is a real honour for me to be not even a member of the ESF, but to be able to take part in that was a huge honour for me, all down to Simon. But I think my lasting memory of Simon was when I worked for Ski Olympic, and my job was to liaise with the ESF to book the ski lessons. And you used to get the holiday makers, and little Johnny wants this and little Jane wants the other, and I don't want my lessons at this time and I want to do this. And every single time Simon had a problem, he sorted it out. He sorted it out for every guest to get what they wanted to the best of his ability. And, like Seb said and like I've said, he gave back to the village. He made sure that people got the enjoyment out of the sport that we all love.
Good. And before ESF, didn't he work on the radio? Or did he work on the radio?
Simon did everything.
Afterwards?
Yeah.
Yes.
Simon actually worked 4 jobs to pay to become a ski instructor. He, funnily enough, worked for Ski Olympic, who I worked for. He, at the same time, was doing a cleaning job in one of the bars. as well as doing his training and doing a bit of work for the ESF. And he had another job that I can't think, but I think he worked 4 jobs to be able to become the ski instructor, and then went on to do the radio.
Well, I remember the first time I ever went to La Rosière to see you. Obviously, I met Seb then, and every morning at 7 o'clock he'd come on the radio with the weather forecast. And I can remember we used to go down to the patisserie and get some hot rolls or some French bread and come back up and have hot dogs for breakfast, if you remember. And which is a weird thing, listeners, hot dogs for breakfast, but it's quite nice. So if you go to a ski resort, okay, don't worry, petit déjeuner, hot dogs. Last you till lunch, or 11s. But I can always remember Simon's voice coming on the radio doing the weather.
But Simon did the weather, he did the state of the slopes, he did the football results from the night before, Brilliant. English football results. He was the kind of little English connection in La Rosière. So.
And did that make more Brits go to La Rosière, do you think? Or do you think, because there must be a word of mouth that if people visit for the first time, there'll be a lot of people coming back because, or is that just a...
The local radio was broadcast in the valley, so he was listening Les Arcs, till Val d'Isère, Plaine Bourg-Saint-Maurice. But yeah, it's like fair play to him, really, being a Brit and having an English accent and going on a local French radio, speaking every morning, every evening, and he did a brilliant job.
I think it's important to talk about this because, as I said in the first instance, ESF in the UK is an operation that we run in just outside London in Hertfordshire. We deal with tour operator liaison, we deal with the website, we deal with the social media, we run the ski show in London and Birmingham for the last couple of years. And I've met some tremendous people in the industry, and I'm sure over the next series of podcasts we'll interview and have a chat with some of them. But I think it's just fitting for this first ever podcast, his Snow Chat podcast, that we do mention Simon, and we do mention the fact that he did put a lot of trust in the UK market and myself via obviously my brother and you, Seb, and there was a good fraternity of ESF instructors then, the youngsters at the time. So there was like yourself, there was Nico, there was others, there was Fabian, and you all had this energy that was... where does that energy come from? Is that energy coming from because you're under the banner of ESF, the brand, or does the energy come because just it is a fun job as well?
It's a very good question. I think it's a bit of both, because first of all, like you said before, in the early 2000s, the resort was still a bit small, so still a village-friendly atmosphere resort, and so we were all friends. Every instructors at VSF were all friends. We went to school together, we went to play football together, we did everything together when we grew up, and then we ended up together at the ski school. So part of this energy came from that, and the other part of the energy is, like you mentioned, putting a red jacket on. I've always felt like when I put a red jacket on, I was a different person. Like if you ask my mum, if you go and talk to her and you ask to describe me, she'd say shy, quiet, discreet, doesn't talk very much, which is like the complete opposite of what you need to be to become an instructor. And funnily enough, this job like make me a better person, make me more confident talking to people and teaching them.
So it learned you a lot of life skills as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think the good thing about Neves Bar and when it was there was it had this Anglo-French feeling. So when I went in there, I'll tell you a story now, is that I can always remember going in there, and a lot of people listening to this have been to Après Ski, and which is after skiing for a couple of hours. So they come off the slopes. I always remember going into your bar, Nev, and I would buy, let's say, a bottle of rosé Prosecco sort of thing, yeah? Not expensive, so I'm not being a Larry person here. It's not a rich thing. It's just a nice general bottle to give a couple of glasses out. And you used to put it into the ice bucket, and you used to give me 3 or 4 glasses, and I used to pass it around. And then Seb would walk in, and I would pass a glass to Seb. And then you, when that bottle, just as it got to the end, Seb would go, Nev, another bottle of that. And then he'd hold the bottle with the Prosecco, yeah? And what would happen then as it goes around? Can you remember those days?
Yeah, I mean, we built not our business around the ESF, but ESF were a massive part of the business, and we used to have them in a lot. And you talk about the Reds. I think as a business owner, away from ESF, the pride in the Reds was paramount. And in fact, dear old Simon always used to say to us, if they disrespect the Reds in the bar, you let me know. And I have to say, I never had to do that. I never had to grass anyone up that they were misbehaving in the bar whilst wearing their Reds. But yeah, we had lots of fun, and there was always that family team spirit of it all.
So I can remember leaving after 2 hours and I'd only bought one bottle.
Oh.
And everybody just bought one bottle, but everybody was like merry, should I say, yeah, just because it was all friendships. And I mean, I was passing glasses of pink Prosecco to people I didn't even know. But then after a couple of glasses, you meet new people and new friends. And that's what I think is a major part of what is good to get over on a podcast is the family of ESF. I've always said, and I've always been very proud to associate myself and with ESF in the UK, because to me it is a family. And to a lot of Brits that have had maybe 20 years ago, 15, 16 years ago, maybe bad experiences with instructors that didn't speak as good English as people wanted, I think, and I know, and we've tried so hard in like 9-10 years to change that. And I mean, talk us through, you gave up a couple of years ago, didn't you, after 20 years? What had changed in ESF over that period of time that you were an instructor to where it is now?
It's hard to tell, and like everything you just mentioned about the image of ESF had, and about being French and having instructors not speaking any good English enough, and or having too many children in the lesson. It's hard for me to talk about it because I was part of ESF La Rosière, which was run a bit by Simon, and Simon was always a step ahead of all that, and I think he's a pioneer of quite a few things that happen in ESF globally. Now he's the first one who introduced a maximum number of people in a lesson, and for the language, obviously, he was English, and he actually taught us, like on a Saturday afternoon, we'd go at the ski school, spend a bit of time indoor, just to learn the vocabulary for the English lessons. But then he'd bring some of his mates to go out skiing, and we'd give them lessons, and so we'd be practicing our English. And then when he felt that we were ready, that our English was good enough, and he'll send us to teach English or English lessons. So,
which is part of the instructor process now. It's very part is the English test, etc. So again,
it has changed over the years massively, and but I think it all started in La Rosière.
I think one of the biggest parts, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but what I've seen over the last 10 years is that when I met you, when Nev was in the resort and he introduced me to you, La Rosière had a fraternity of instructors that were born and bred in the mountain. Now, you move it on to modern day times, a lot of our young instructors are worldly travelled. So they, instead of staying in the mountains in the summer and doing local jobs and whether they work on a farm or they construction or whatever they do, they now travel. So to actually have an 18 to 25-year-old instructor, they've probably, and the high majority have been to the UK on holiday or travel. They've been across the world. Some instructors travel to places like China, don't they? And they teach out in Australia. There's a connection with ESF in Victoria. So it's almost a case now where the directors around all of the ESF have got a good grip on people speaking English and having that cultural mix of being able to deal with the British in the way that we as Brits like to be dealt with for a ski school. Is that, would you say that's correct? Or
yeah, very much so. And I think back in our days when I started, it wasn't the case because we were not traveling as much. And like, yeah, I came to the UK. I was 17 for the first time, but I was well excited. And nowadays, you go to the UK pretty much like same as if you were going to a supermarket. Yeah. So it's a bit different, but yeah, it helped massively. Like, not just for the language, but seeing different culture, it helps to understand people and understand their need. And yeah, if you get like Brazilian people in your lesson and you've been there, so it will help massively to feel them at ease and know what they need and what they want or what they like or don't like.
I think it's important as well to obviously with your bar, with obviously the ESF instructors coming in at Praise Ski and being part of your 5 years of running the bar. What sort of taking the instructors out of it and having your guests? What was the feeling of their lessons within ESF at the time? Was it like? Seb's brilliant and Nico's brilliant, or was there things that you worked with Simon and Seb on to better ESF from a client business point of view?
I think first of all, just finishing that conversation you just had with Seb, I think one thing you have missed in the middle of all that is in that 20 odd years time period, we went from very long straight skis to carving skis.
Good point.
And we also saw the introduction of snowboarding. We also saw various different sports and activities on the mountain, and I think the ESF were through Simon again in La Rosière. It's what I know and what I've lived with. But Simon saw the competition coming. That it isn't just teaching people to ski, and then there were more things to do on the mountain. There were more ski schools popping up, some French, some English, and you had to keep in front of the game. And I think Simon was, as Seb said, Simon was ahead of the game in bringing in different activities on the mountain and getting away from we only teach skiing and your knees have got to be together on long straight skis. And I think as the skiing world changed, Simon and ESF were at the forefront of that to bring those changes in.
That's a good point. Good point. So where we are today with ESF, and it's very important that I need to say this, is that La Rosière we're talking about, and obviously Simon, but there are hundreds of resorts around the French mountains, and they're all individually directed by a director. That, if you didn't know, listeners, that are voted in by the instructors at a certain period of time, maybe every 4 years, something like 4 or 5 years. And it's very important that the directors manage their school. Obviously, Simon managed the British part particularly well, as you said. I just need to obviously open it up a little bit, is most schools will have the same sort of issues, like maybe too many children in February half term in a lesson. There's not one overriding issue that people moan or complain about now, is there? I mean, I've dealt with many schools on the number of children. It is hopefully no more than 10, but obviously if there's no instructors, then it has to be amended that way. But other than that, since I've worked with ESF, we have tried to iron out a lot of the issues. So fundamentally now, what is the key thing that listeners that may not know ESF, Seb, tell us, ESF stands for what? What if you said what does it stand for now in 2024?
Before I move to that point, just to bounce back on what you just said in about the number of children or people in the lesson, it's not always the numbers, it's also the standards within the group. It's actually easier to teach a group of 10 people of exactly the same level rather than 6 people with 3 different levels. So it's not always about the numbers. Obviously, it's what you see from the chairlift, but it's it can happen very smoothly, a group of 10 or 12, and people can benefit a lot more than a smaller group with a different level within the group. So it's not just about the numbers, it's about how the groups are set up at the start of the week.
Okay. So we're talking about competition. I'm not going to mention any of the competition, but there is competition out there, which is healthy. How does ESF fare in your eyes when you're in La Rosière? I mean, obviously it's difficult because Simon was so Brit-led. But
I've skied in other French resorts. I'm just going to say it. Very few ski schools have the name school in their name. They've all got funky, modern, trendy names. And it again goes back to, are you taking out of the village that you're working in? Do you just want to run it as an out-and-out business and make as much money as possible? Or are you trying to put back into the local village? Very few independent ski instructing companies will run the ski club that you learn to... you're racing in. That's predominantly all done by the ESF. And that again is for me is a great example of putting back into the village rather than just taking out the profit.
That's a good point. You want to add to that, Seb, or not?
Yeah, like ESF and the ski club, like obviously they're training all the young children, they're training the future stars, and you can see the ESF logo on any French racers on their outfit or on their helmet. They've got ESF because
That's a good thing you mentioned about having
ESF and the ski clubs feeds the reservoir for people who are potentially race to the Olympics.
How open, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you, how open is it for a British skier now listening to this podcast thinking, actually, I see the red jackets everywhere. I love skiing in France, and I'm a pretty good skier. I'd like to go into that sort of process of becoming an ESF instructor. What is the process? Do you know the current process at the moment?
First of all, the most important thing will be the standard of technique, because that's what's going to take the most time, the longest. All the other courses, then if you're a bit experienced and if you listen well and if you train well, you'll be fine. But it's just getting this level of technique in a slalom actually and a giant slalom that would be the two key things that where not just the British skiers but French as well who are struggling the most. Because
And it's called the test technique, isn't it? Yeah?
Yes,
And it's a time slalom
and the Euro test,
and the Euro test.
which is timed giant slalom as well. But going back to what you said before about being a family and everyone from the resort together, because the resorts have grown a lot, the locals were not enough people to feed the ski school, so we had to bring people from further down the valley and from big cities like Paris or Lyon, and these people, when they wanted to become an instructor, that's where they struggled the most at this time slalom. So it's getting to this level of
So
skiing.
really, for anybody listening or watching this, if you want to become an instructor, then there is a process to go through. It's online at the website, and it's quite an interesting process. And it does cost some money, but you can find information there online at esf-uk.co.uk. So moving on, excuse me. I want to talk about the good times, okay, La Rosière, because I think we've had a good little chat about the ethos of ESF, how much of a family it is, and really this podcast isn't to sell ESF because thousands and thousands of Brits use ESF, as you both know, and I've been privileged to speak to hundreds, if not thousands, of clients over 9 years.
And they use it now as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, my kids learned through ESF, and it's a lovely family to be a part of and to understand it and to use on your holiday. But I want to ask you two, because we're getting into the nitty gritty of fun. So, look, you've known each other for quite a few years, okay? I know a lot of the stories, but I'd like you to just tell the story about the where you get roped together. What's that called?
Called the cordée.
Yeah. Explain that, and we'll talk about that one night where you were in your Union Jack boxers and you were with Simon on that. You were on that, weren't you? Yep. So talk to me how that came about. What was that?
A cordée, if you're good in French and if you're good at climbing, it's when you climb a mountain, you go a group of people or rope together for safety reasons. So when we first did it, we had a group
I'm
of
laughing already. Go on.
a group of 8 to 10 guys, 10 people, because there were some ladies sometimes. But yeah, a group of 8 to 10 all roped together with about 2 meters of rope in between each others. We'd tie the rope together at the start of the night and we'd go around all the bars in the resort and spend all night tied together, which you can understand. It's quite good fun, and when it becomes a toilet break and all that, it's
You have
quite
to all go.
funny. We have to all go, and if
But
one
Seb,
needs
you
to
also
go,
make it sound like we walked into all the bars. There were times when we were lowered in through the windows or hoisted back out through windows because you've got 7 people at the other end of the rope carrying you. So yeah,
I mean, this
crazy fun.
Obviously, this wouldn't happen in today's society, but
No, that was 20
that
years
was
ago.
20 years
more
ago.
than
But I
that.
can remember when you both were connected. Someone jumped off the balcony of La Roque,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and hung there. And the person at the bar, which I think was Simon, still drinking. And as more people go off and just go down and down, Simon's like being pulled like this way, and all of a sudden he drinks his drink, and everybody just goes and jumps off into the snow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. We literally had to go where everyone else went. So
madness.
You
Yeah, it
had
was
to
good.
follow the flow really from 8 in the evening till quite late at night. But
And the thing is, at the day, you used to all get up in the morning and carry on working.
yeah, because that's what we used to do. We were.
So, going back to the personal side of being an instructor, this is what I try to get over to a lot of the customers and obviously listeners listening to this. Everybody's human, and
Yeah.
one of the biggest issues I get is my instructor turned up and he was a bit miserable, and the way that I counteract that sort of, it's not even a complaint, it's an observation, is everybody is human. And you don't know when an instructor, male or female, wake up in the morning, whether they've had a bad morning, whether their wife or their boyfriend or their girlfriend or their mum or their dad are ill, or maybe they've had a little accident in their car or their pet's ill. And you have to put all that aside as a school teacher would, don't you? When you get to 9 o'clock at the lifts, if you're a 9 o'clock start. I mean, tell the listeners now that how personal an instructor's job is in that sort of way. You've got to, how do you focus yourself?
It's back to what I said before. When I was putting this red jacket on, it made me a different person. It's almost like when I was putting this red jacket on, all my personal problems stayed aside, stayed behind, and I was becoming Seb the instructor. And when the jacket came back off, I was back to my usual problem. But yeah, I don't know, it happened almost naturally for me. I didn't have to work too hard to
Because
keep the focus on
in,
my job.
and I never agree with this, when we were growing up, if you were a French skiing instructor, I mean, I used to look up to the French. I mean, I used to think, wow, what a job. Yeah, and I used to think in the UK, you either want to be a footballer, if you were a boy or a girl, a footballer, an astronaut, or actually a skiing instructor, because you looked at your jackets and your suits and your little moustache at the time, and you think, oh, I want to be a French skiing instructor because they are just God. I think that I mean, is that the same with you?
What, you'll still notice I'm the only one here who hasn't got an ESF jumper on. I've always wanted an ESF jumper.
There you go.
And that's how it is. Everyone wants to be a ski instructor, and you know.
So I think that the serious point of that comment is there is a responsibility as well. Even though when you put your red on, you feel proud, the responsibility is that you are teaching.
And it's massive responsibility because, like, especially when you're teaching children, like the parents, they put all their trust to you. They give their children's life, like their children is the most precious thing they've got in their life, and like they give them to you, and you take them out in a hostile environment sometimes to lifts where it can be blizzard, or you can have all sorts of weather, temperature, and slopes, speeds. And I think it doesn't really happen anywhere else. Like when you take your children to football, they're on a pitch somewhere, but you can see them, or they're enclosed somewhere. I think it's the only place, skiing, where you give your children and you give them to an instructor, and they're fully responsible for them.
Let's hope there's mums and dads listening to this, and they've seen the social media, ESF UK on Instagram and Facebook, and they've looked at the website, and they've got hold of this podcast. What advice, as a 20-year ESF instructor in your day, what advice would you give to parents that have never been skiing, that are looking at skiing perhaps this year, hopefully this year, as a viable holiday for a week? Let's say they've saved some money and they've gone, right, we are going to do our first ski holiday. As an ESF instructor, without me telling them, what advice would you give a new parent coming as a family to any French ski resort now, looking for lessons?
The first advice is get lessons, definitely, if you've never skied before, for your safety and for the safety of the others, and to be able to enjoy, because that's the ultimate goal. It's to have fun all together as a family, and it might take a while. It might not happen on the first or second day because it takes a bit of time to learn, but by the end of the week you should be able, even if it's just on the nursery slope or on green slope, to be able to have some fun all together as a family.
It's very important for the first podcast, as we've all agreed, is to talk for the listeners listen to this on. Somebody came up to me at the ski show and said, I didn't know you had a UK office in ESF. And I said, oh yeah, we've had it for about 9-10 years. And then someone came and said, what, an office of ESF in the UK? And it was like a bizarre question for me, because I'm thinking, yeah, we've been running ESF, but obviously the members of the public, they don't see behind the scenes. They don't see that there is a presence working for their behalf in the team that we run in the UK, which I hope they do now. But let's go back to the very, very early days of when the UK market was something that Simon took to the syndicate. Yeah, talk us about Simon's British angle for ESF on how he wanted the instructors to...
We talked about this subject before when I said about Simon teaching us English, and way before that, way before he started, he took a bunch of instructors from the ski school, and he took them to Yorkshire for about a week. It used to happen in the autumn, about October, November time, and they used to go there for about a week or something.
What, to learn English?
To learn English in Yorkshire pubs.
and play a bit of golf, I guess.
Yeah. So, it was the best way to learn English. I think it was even like, it was organized properly. Like sometimes he was letting them go wild in the city with something to do or something to bring back, so they'd have to go in shops and ask for something, and a bit like a treasure hunt and a game. So it was like not just going to the pub and have a few drinks, it was properly learning English. And so that was the base of training people and making sure that he had instructors with a level of English which was good enough for the British market. And after that, once he had a group of instructors which could speak good English, that's when he introduced the English-only lessons in the ski school. So because that was one of the fear of some of the British customers, is that being mixed to French people and having an instructor who hardly speak English. So then Simon introduced like lessons for English speaking only. So you'd be with mostly British, but some people from other countries, but it was an English-speaking lesson.
Good. And then obviously when you met Simon?
Yeah, I think going on from that, I mean, I met Simon when, we would be having a drink and Simon would be not drowning his sorrows as such, but he'd be having a drink because he's had a hard day trying to convince the old school Renés of the world that, we're going to do English-only lessons, and the old school French instructors were like, why are we doing that? And what do you mean I've got to ski with my legs a bit further apart? And Simon was constantly fighting a battle to not only teach the youngsters English and how to teach, like you've said, Seb, but also trying to win over the older generation to encourage them that change is coming and we need to adapt and improve the product we're offering. So he was kind of doing it at both ends of the spectrum. And then obviously he had the bright idea when we were talking, and I mentioned, what you did and what your business was, and how your marketing company, etc. And I think a little light bulb went off in Simon's head that he thought, well, we've got a great product. Once you get to the resort, how do we promote that product to get you to the resort?
Yeah, good point.
And I think that was probably over a demi-pression in the bar was the birth of ESF UK.
Yeah, I agree. And then he took it to the syndicate, and for the listeners, there is an ESF syndicate, which is a board of directors and a head office, which is based in Grenoble. And it's again very much of an organisation that talks and thrashes out ideas. And I must mention the international director at the time was now our president. Mr. Eric Bresch, who was instrumental, like Simon was, in bringing ESF UK to the marketplace. And I must thank Eric for that, because Eric was another La Rosière-based family, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's got some roots there.
again, got some good roots in La Rosière. And I think what Eric did after Simon passed on the idea, Eric took me forward, and I thank him for that, into a marketplace of taking a 9% British market across the board, and improving that with a decent website, introducing me to a hell of amount of people that I've had the privilege to meet at the syndicate, and educating me. I wish I could repay him with my knowledge of French, but Eric, I will do one day. I promise. I will promise. But no, I must thank the current president for that, and he's gone on to obviously be in a very statuesque position with ESF, and long may he reign. But I think going back to the ESF UK part of it, is our job in the UK is to understand the British market. And what I think is very important to get over, without being too salesy, is these guys in France are waiting for the British market, for the Brits in this country to go and ski, to learn to ski, to improve their technique, to, as Nev said, to try other aspects. It's not just about skiing and snowboarding, is it? I mean, what other aspects of the mountain sport does ESF offer? I mean, reel them off, Seb. Go on.
Oh, there's about all the off-piste and the ski touring and the heli skiing, and you've got some kind of sports like snake glace and Una, like sledging, and
it's endless.
Yes, it is.
I think the other thing was not so much the disciplines. I think one of the things that came in when I was over there, probably 10, 15 years ago, was too cool for school. So if you've got the teenagers that don't want to get stuck in a lesson 6 days a week for 2.5 hours 2.5 hours a day for 6 days a week, ESF came up with this too cool for school. So it was 3 days a week for a couple of hours, and you could do too cool for school on the slope on your skis, or if you wanted to go into the snow park on your snowboard, and it just gave everybody a variety of options to learn and love the sport.
I mean,
and bringing all the teenagers together, it was not just skiing. Like, we used to go bowling or ice skating as well if the weather was bad. It was just trying to bring the
I think now,
together.
it's evolved so much now. I mean, I know many directors of ESF, and they're all great guys and girls, and a lot of the aspects of not just skiing and snowboarding is fascinating. I mean, I mentioned just what Alpe d'Huez, what the director there, Xavier, has done is he's produced so many alternative products which the Brits love, and he's got a very good Brit following with some brilliant instructors there. And actually, this is a plug for podcast number 2 or 3 maybe, but we will be in Alpe d'Huez, and we'll be having some guests from Alpe d'Huez on our next podcast. So hopefully listen out for that. But look, finally, guys, I want to talk about, we go back to the good old days and everything, and I think the listeners of this podcast will understand that ESF is a ski school that is there to have fun, to be safe, and to enjoy. And I do want to mention a good friend of ours, and especially mine, Sebastian Scott, another Seb. But Sebastian Scott is the technical director at ESF in Aim-les-Plaines, as you well know, for Club Med. And he always used to say to me, ESF, what does that stand for? And he came up with education, safety and fun, which I know it's not and maybe the boss isn't going to listen to this, but it's something that I've always looked at and thought, education, which it is, safety, which is paramount, and fun, which is what a lesson's about. So, Seb Scott, if you listen to this or watching this, thanks, mate. I will. That is mine. Okay, but no, I'll use that. So yeah, finally talking about the good old days in La Rosière. Give me some of the fun memories you've had of in lesson now, where you may have an adult lesson, and can you remember back to anything in particular, or maybe yourself, Nev, where you're in the bar with a family have come in and they've been on a lesson with ESF and there's a funny story?
Well, I think for me the biggest example of
You can think about a story now.
ESF in general and fun has got to be the Monday night torchlight descent, when you're all dressed up.
Oh, yeah, brilliant.
I mean, every season was a different story. I think there was a Star Wars one year, wasn't there?
Yep.
And somebody had to rescue Princess Leia, and it was all done by the ESF guys, at night in the dark, and it just was fun. It was brilliant. They
And
were
the van
all
show afterwards.
van show and a hot chocolate afterwards, all under lights, fireworks at certain times of the
Did
year.
you enjoy that? Did you enjoy the Monday night?
Yeah, and what was going to be my good fun memory as well, but the part where it carried on afterward, when we used to call it the all the night. So that's when we used to keep skis and boots all night. So after the show, we'd keep the boots and skis on and ski down the stairs at the Maison du Ski, and then been pulled by the car, walk into a bar with the boots and skis on, and then go up the stairs in the commercial center and ski back down and be on the dance floor with skis on. It does require a bit of space, but it's good fun dancing with the skis on.
And this is after you've all skied down, touching hands with all the crowd in just your underpants.
And you're absolutely right. And that was the fun bit. The next morning, you'd be there at 9 o'clock with a client, and they saw you, and they'd be like, with some shine in their eyes, and be like, "It was amazing. We loved it."
They were the good old days, weren't they?
Yes.
I mean, I know you can't because health and safety now, but it is good to remember how the evolution of a ski holiday takes place, and it's not just about your après ski, it's not just about the accommodation, but the lessons and part of your learning experience and meeting an instructor from ESF and having lessons is a massive part of a holiday, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the one thing that has changed a lot in the last 20 years, or in my 20 years, is the amount of training and the constant retraining or constant need to be better. That's one of the big requirements for people, and that having professional in front of them, it's key.
Final points, guys, because it's been, for me, a privilege to, one, be part of ESF, Seb, and be part of the family running the UK market. But as a Frenchman living in the UK now, seeing 20 years plus your years of racing, where do you see the market going for the Brits in France? Where do you see it going? Will it improve more and more? You think how do we get more Brits to ski in France and with ESF?
I don't know the figures, but I think it's heading in the right direction. I'm trying to stay connected a bit and follow what's going on in the resort, because now I only use it as a customer, going there on holiday, enjoy skiing. But yeah, I think it's heading in the right direction, as it took a bit of time for people to open up their mind and think about alternative, like you said, in Alpe d'Huez and all that, and now they're working hard on it, and I think I'd say keep going. Good.
And as an ex-business owner in the mountains, where do you see the business, the commerce in I mean, you go to quite a few resorts, and you have been, not just Lozère, but where do you see the commerce and the business? How is that changing?
Well, in any walk of business life now, it's all about partnerships, and I think, I think as a business owner in La Rosière, the partnerships that I had with ESF, and as you said, Seb, the ESF logo all over the French ski teams, etc. It's about the partnerships you build as a business, and for me personally, as a holiday maker, like you said, now I would always use the ESF. When I lived up there and I was a local, most of my friends were in the ESF, and when I was a business owner up there, the partnership I had with the ESF was the biggest partnership we had, and I think that's where ESF have got to take this forward now, is the partnerships in business.
And also, there are many people and Brits that have used ESF. I mean, Shemi Alcott, as a name, as one of our most famous female downhill skiers in the UK. Her children, over Christmas, they ski in Flen with Christophe, the director there, and she often posts with ESF tagging. So, I mean, that's Shemi, and Shemi's a lovely lady, and maybe we'll get on her on a podcast one day. But I think, guys, I'm going to end it now.
Will you invite me when she's there?
Shemi, if you are watching, Seb wants to be on the podcast. But no, I'm sure Shemi and the like, and she's got some fascinating tales as well. So, and we are going to have other people on the podcast moving forward in the series. But for now, I'd like to thank both of you for being here today for our first one. I think it's only fitting for me to say thank you for people for listening to this, and I would just like to dedicate the first podcast to the late Simon Atkinson, our friend.